I'm done with you and your boring life. I'm taking everything. And this house is sold, by the way. Enjoy what's left." The note on my kitchen counter hit me like a slap across the face. My hands trembled as I read those cruel words, scrawled in David's messy handwriting on the back of our electric bill. A wave of emotions washed over me: shock, hurt, anger. But strangely, what surfaced most was a sense of calm determination. I pulled out my phone and typed a simple response. "Saw your note. Thanks for the heads up." My name is Nina Parker, and at 36, I never imagined I'd be standing in my kitchen, reading a goodbye note from my husband of 12 years. I'm an entrepreneur who built a successful online business selling handcrafted jewelry, something David always dismissed as my little hobby. Looking back, I should have seen this coming. The signs were all there. The late nights at the office, the hushed phone calls, the way he'd quickly close his laptop whenever I walked into the room. But what David didn't know was that I wasn't as naive as he thought. 6 months ago, I noticed something odd while paying our bills. Large sums of money were being transferred out of our joint account into an account I didn't recognize. When I casually mentioned it to David, he brushed it off as business investments. That's when I knew I needed to protect myself. I may have looked like the perfect, supportive wife on the outside, but inside I was preparing for war. I started documenting everything: the unexplained expenses, the suspicious phone calls, even the nights he claimed to be working late, but his office building was dark when I drove by. I opened a separate bank account and gradually moved my personal savings there. I consulted with Sarah, my best friend who happens to be a divorce attorney, and she helped me understand my rights and options. Most importantly, during our recent home renovation, I had the house refinanced solely in my name, something David was too preoccupied with his investments to notice. Now, standing in our kitchen, my kitchen, reading his pathetic attempt at a power play, I couldn't help but feel a slight smile tugging at my lips. David always underestimated me, treated me like I was some clueless housewife playing at running a business. He probably thought this note would destroy me, leave me broken and begging him to come back. Instead, I felt strangely liberated. The pretense was finally over. I took a deep breath, smoothed down my blouse, and pulled out my laptop. It was time to set things in motion. David wanted to play hardball? Fine. But he was about to learn that I'd been in training for this game a lot longer than he realized. The signs of David's deception had started small. Last Christmas, he gave me a silver bracelet that looked expensive, but turned out to be a cheap knockoff. I would know, having worked with fine jewelry for years. When I confronted him about it, he turned it around on me, calling me materialistic and ungrateful. That was David's way, always making me doubt myself, always twisting things to make me look like the unreasonable one. Our marriage wasn't always like this. In the early days, David supported my dreams. He helped me set up my first online store and celebrated with champagne when I made my first big sale. But as my business grew, something changed in him. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was jealousy, but he started making snide comments about my little online shop at dinner parties, acting like I was playing at being a businesswoman while he did real work at his accounting firm. I remember the day I landed a contract with a major department store chain. Instead of celebrating, David barely looked up from his phone. "That's nice, honey," he said, dismissing what was possibly the biggest achievement of my career. That night, I cried myself to sleep, but it wasn't from sadness. It was from anger. Anger at myself for letting him diminish my accomplishments, for staying quiet when he belittled me in front of our friends. The real wake-up call came 3 months ago. I was having coffee with my sister Janet, who works at the same bank David uses for his business accounts. She hesitated before telling me she'd seen something concerning: large withdrawals, suspicious transfers. "Nina," she said, gripping my hand across the table, "I think he's planning something. You need to protect yourself." That conversation changed everything. I started paying attention to details I'd been ignoring: the way David always insisted on handling our finances, despite my business background. The mysterious weekend business trips that he couldn't explain. The whispered phone conversations that ended abruptly when I entered the room. Each discovery was like a piece of a puzzle I hadn't wanted to see. I reached out to Sarah, my best friend since college, and now a successful divorce attorney. Over lunch, she listened to everything and then gave me a hard look. "Nina," she said, "you're smart, successful, and stronger than you realize. Stop playing the role he's assigned you. Start playing chess instead of checkers." So that's exactly what I did. While David thought I was busy with my little hobby, I was carefully documenting every suspicious transaction, every unexplained absence, every lie. I kept my plans quiet, maintained my routine, played the part of the trusting wife while secretly preparing for the storm I knew was coming. The day after finding David's note, I received an email from our real estate agent, Marcus. My heart skipped a beat when I saw the subject line: "Urgent, house sale documentation required." Opening it, I discovered that David had indeed tried to list our house for sale, but there was a problem. He couldn't proceed without my signature since the refinancing papers had put the house solely in my name during our renovation. I remembered that day clearly. David had been too busy to attend the meeting with the bank, casually telling me to just handle it. He'd signed a power of attorney without even reading it, assuming I would simply do what I'd always done, take care of the details while he made the important decisions. His carelessness had just become his biggest mistake. I called Marcus immediately. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding," I said calmly. "I haven't authorized any sale of the property." There was an awkward pause before Marcus explained that David had been quite insistent about listing the house immediately. I could hear the discomfort in his voice as he described David's arrogant assumption that everything was already handled. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text from David. "Called the real estate agent. Sign the papers when they come. I'll give you 24 hours to pack your stuff." The contempt in his message made my blood boil, but I maintained my composure. This was the moment I'd been preparing for. I dialed Sarah's number. "It's time," I said when she answered. She understood immediately. We'd been preparing for this scenario for months, gathering evidence, documenting everything. She had already drafted the divorce papers, anticipating David's eventual move, but unlike his plans, ours were legally sound and airtight. "Remember," Sarah said, "don't respond to any more of his messages. Let him think he's in control. We'll hit him with everything at once: the protected house deed, the documented fund transfers, everything." Her confidence reinforced my resolve. This wasn't just about protecting my assets anymore. It was about standing up for myself after years of subtle manipulation and dismissal. I sat at my desk, looking at the framed photo of David and me from happier times. The smiling woman in the picture seemed like a stranger now, someone who didn't yet know her own strength. I took the frame down and placed it in a drawer. It was time to decide what to do next, and for the first time in our marriage, I was the one holding all the cards. The next morning, I received a barrage of increasingly angry texts from David. "Why isn't the house listed yet? Marcus says there's a problem with the paperwork. Stop playing games and sign the documents." Each message revealed his growing frustration as his carefully laid plans began to unravel. I was in my home office finalizing some jewelry orders when the doorbell rang. Standing on my porch was David, his face flushed with anger. This was the first time I'd seen him since finding his note, and I was surprised to feel nothing but calm determination. "What did you do?" he demanded, pushing past me into the foyer. "Marcus says I can't sell the house without your signature, but that's impossible. I handled all our financial matters." I crossed my arms, standing my ground. "Did you? Like you handled my business accounts?" My voice was steady, masking the way my heart was pounding. "The ones you've been secretly transferring money from?" His face paled slightly before he recovered. "What are you talking about? I made a few investments for our future. You wouldn't understand, you just play with beads all day." "Actually, I understand perfectly," I replied, walking to my desk and pulling out a thick folder. "I understand that you've been siphoning money from our joint accounts. I understand that you tried to sell a house that's only in my name. And I understand that you thought I was too stupid to notice any of it." David's expression shifted from anger to confusion, then to something close to fear. What do you mean the house is only in your name? Remember that refinancing paperwork you were too busy to read? The renovation meeting you couldn't be bothered to attend? I watched as realization dawned on his face. You signed over your rights to the house. It's mine, David. Just like the business you thought was just a hobby, the one that's now worth more than your annual salary. He sank onto the couch, his arrogance deflating. You can't do this to me, he said, but his voice had lost its edge. I've already made arrangements. I have plans. Plans that required my money, my house, and my compliance, I interrupted. But here's what's actually going to happen. You're going to leave my house, and my lawyer will be contacting you about the divorce proceedings. And those funds you transferred? We'll be discussing those too. David tried to regain his composure, straightening his tie as he stood up. You're bluffing, he said, but I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. You don't have the resources or the knowledge to fight me on this. I walked to my desk and pulled out another folder. You mean like these bank statements showing systematic withdrawals from our joint accounts? I laid out document after document. Or these emails you accidentally left open on our shared iPad discussing your plans to leave? Or maybe you'd be interested in seeing the private investigator's report about your business trips to Vegas. His face grew paler with each revelation. You hired a private investigator? No, David. Sarah did. You remember Sarah, right? My coffee friend who you never took seriously? The one who happens to be one of the best divorce attorneys in the state? I kept my voice level, even as I watched him begin to crumble. He ran his hands through his hair, pacing the room. This isn't how this was supposed to go, he muttered. You were supposed to... What? Breakdown? Beg you to stay? Accept whatever crumbs you decided to leave me? I shook my head. That's not happening. I've already frozen our joint accounts, legally, since I have documentation of your unauthorized withdrawals. The house isn't going anywhere, and my business, well, that was never yours to take in the first place. David's phone buzzed. He looked at it, and I could see the blood drain from his face. Your lawyer, he said weakly. She's already... Filing for divorce, yes. She's also requesting an emergency hearing about the funds you transferred. We have records of everything, David. Every transaction, every email, every lie. He slumped back onto the couch, looking defeated. I didn't think you'd fight back, he admitted. You always just went along with everything. That was your biggest mistake, I replied. You were so busy underestimating me that you never noticed I'd stopped underestimating myself. The doorbell rang again. This time it was Sarah, right on schedule. David looked up, panic finally setting in as he realized just how thoroughly he'd been outmaneuvered. You should leave now, I said firmly. Any further communication can go through our lawyers. I opened the front door, where Sarah stood with a professional smile and a briefcase full of additional documents we'd prepared. As David walked past Sarah, he looked like a shadow of the confident man who'd left that cruel note in my kitchen. Nina, please, he tried one last time. We can talk about this. Like you talked to me about selling our house? I asked. Or about draining our accounts? Sarah placed a gentle hand on my shoulder, reminding me to stay calm and focused. David's phone started ringing. It was his bank. Sarah had warned me this would happen. The moment our divorce petition was filed, it triggered an investigation into those suspicious transfers he'd made. I watched as he answered the call, his face growing increasingly distressed as he listened. What do you mean, frozen? He stammered into the phone. No, you don't understand. I need access to those accounts. He looked at me desperately, finally understanding just how thoroughly his plans had backfired. Sarah stepped forward, her voice professional but firm. Mr. Parker, I suggest you contact your own attorney. We have substantial evidence of financial misconduct, and the court takes these matters very seriously. David's legs seemed to give out, and he sank onto the front steps of what he now realized was no longer his home. Tears started streaming down his face. Not tears of remorse, I noticed, but tears of frustration and defeat. Everything he'd planned, every scheme he'd carefully laid out was crumbling around him. "I never thought," he began. "That's right," I interrupted. You never thought I'd stand up for myself. You never thought I'd be smart enough to protect myself. You never thought I'd be strong enough to walk away. That's why you left a note instead of having a real conversation. Because you never really knew me at all." As we watched him slowly walk to his car, Sarah squeezed my hand. "You did good, Nina. Really good." She'd been more than just my lawyer through all this. She'd been my rock, helping me find strength I didn't know I had. David's car disappeared around the corner, and I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The pretense was over. No more checking bank statements in secret. No more documenting his lies. No more playing the role of the docile wife. I was free. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into rebuilding my life. The jewelry business, which David had dismissed for so long, became my sanctuary. Orders were pouring in, and I was finally free to expand without hearing snide comments about wasting money on new equipment or materials. Sarah kept me updated on the legal proceedings. David had hired an aggressive attorney, but it didn't matter. We had documented everything meticulously. The judge was particularly interested in the paper trail of his financial misconduct. Those business investments he'd been making, they turned out to be gambling losses in Vegas and attempts to hide money in accounts I wasn't supposed to find. The house, my beautiful craftsman-style home that I'd lovingly renovated, remained mine. I redecorated slowly, erasing traces of David room by room. I painted the living room the deep blue color he'd always vetoed, converted his home office into my jewelry studio, and finally bought that antique workbench I'd been eyeing for years. Each change felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. My sister Janet came over often, helping me sort through years of accumulated memories. "Remember how he used to mock your little hobby at family gatherings?" she said one evening as we sorted through old photos. "Now look at you. You're featured in 3 major magazines, and he's living in a 1-bedroom apartment." She was right. The business was thriving now that I could focus on it fully. I'd hired 2 assistants to help with orders, and a major department store had just picked up my newest collection. The irony wasn't lost on me. Everything David had belittled was now sustaining me, while his smart investments had left him nearly bankrupt. My friends rallied around me in ways I never expected. Sarah, beyond being my attorney, spent countless evenings with me, helping me process everything. "You're not just surviving," she told me over wine one night. "You're flourishing." She was right. I felt stronger, more confident, more myself than I had in years. The divorce proceedings revealed more of David's deceptions than even I had uncovered. The bank's investigation found that he'd been gambling away significant sums of money for years, hiding the losses and hoping to cover them with the money he'd planned to get from selling the house. When that plan fell apart, everything else did too. One morning, I received an email from Marcus, the real estate agent. He apologized profusely for his role in David's attempted house sale and asked if I'd be interested in helping his wife choose jewelry for their anniversary. I smiled at the irony. My little hobby was now earning me respect from the very people who had once dismissed it. The hardest part wasn't the legal battles or even the loneliness. It was confronting how much of myself I'd buried to maintain the illusion of a happy marriage. I'd dimmed my light, shrunk my dreams, and doubted my instincts for years. But as I sat in my studio, working on a custom piece while sunshine streamed through the windows, I realized that I was finally living life on my own terms. 6 months after finding David's note, I attended a local business owners gala. It was the first time I'd been to a major social event since the divorce, and I'd almost talked myself out of going. But Sarah insisted, saying it was time to rejoin the world properly. I wore a black dress that David would have called too flashy, and jewelry from my own latest collection. As I walked into the ballroom, I caught sight of my reflection in a mirror and barely recognized myself. Gone was the hesitant woman who used to check with her husband before making any decision. In her place stood someone confident, someone who knew her worth. During the evening, I ran into several couples who used to be our friends. Most had heard about the divorce through the grapevine, and their reactions were telling. The wives especially seemed different around me. More open, more real. One of them, Barbara, pulled me aside and confided that my story had given her the courage to look more closely at her own marriage. "When I heard how you handled everything," she whispered, "it made me realize I don't have to accept being treated like I'm stupid just because I chose to start my own business instead of staying